What if everything we've been taught about ancient history is missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Picture this: a map drawn hundreds of years ago, showing the precise outline of Antarctica. But here's the catch. It's depicted without ice, as if the cartographer had access to knowledge impossible for their time. This isn't science fiction. It's just one of 20 baffling ancient maps that defy logic, timelines, and even our understanding of human ingenuity. These aren't mere mistakes or lucky guesses. They're meticulously crafted documents that reveal coastlines, landmasses, and geographical details our ancestors shouldn't have known, raising questions that historians and scientists still struggle to answer. Think about the implications. How could a map from the 1500s accurately depict the Amazon River's course or the jagged cliffs of a continent buried under miles of ice? Who were these mysterious cartographers, and what lost civilizations might have possessed knowledge far beyond what we've credited them with? These maps don't just sit quietly in museums. They scream of forgotten voyages, advanced technologies, or perhaps even encounters with cultures whose stories were erased by time. They force us to reconsider the narrative of human exploration, hinting at a past far more complex and interconnected than textbooks suggest. This journey isn't just about maps. It's about the secrets they guard, the whispers of a world where ancient sailors might have charted territories we assume were undiscovered, where knowledge was passed down through generations only to vanish into myth. As we uncover each of these 20 enigmatic artifacts, you'll witness coastlines that match satellite imagery, continents drawn centuries before their official discovery, and clues that point to a global network of information predating modern science. By the time we reach the final map, you won't just see ink on parchment. You'll see a challenge to history itself, an invitation to question what we think we know and to wonder what else might be hiding in the shadows of the past. Ready to begin? Let's dive in. The Piri Reis map isn't just an artifact, it's a time capsule of impossible knowledge. Drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, this faded parchment was rediscovered in 1929, tucked away in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. At first glance, it appears to be a typical early 16th century map of the known world, but the devil is in the details. The southern edge of the map shows a landmass with uncanny resemblance to Antarctica's coastline, but here's what defies explanation. It's depicted without ice, as if someone had surveyed it thousands of years before the continent was officially discovered in 1820. What makes this so baffling? Modern seismic surveys confirm that Antarctica's ice-free coastline matches the contours on Piri Reis's map with eerie precision. But here's the catch: Antarctica has been buried under ice for at least 6,000 years. So how could a map from the 1500s capture terrain no human eye had seen for millennia? Piri Reis himself left a clue in the margins. He claimed his work was pieced together from far older sources, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. These source maps, he wrote, came from the four corners of the earth, including charts used by ancient seafarers whose names are lost to history. The implications are staggering. Could advanced civilizations have explored Antarctica in prehistory, leaving behind cartographic knowledge that trickled down through the ages? Some researchers point to the possibility of a lost global maritime culture, while others, more controversially, speculate about outside influences, from forgotten technologies to theories that stretch the imagination. Skeptics argue it's a coincidence or a misidentified landmass, but the accuracy is hard to dismiss. The map even includes mountain ranges we've only confirmed with modern satellite imagery. One thing is certain: the Piri Reis map forces us to confront gaps in our understanding of human exploration. If this single artifact is correct, history as we know it is missing entire chapters filled with intrepid explorers, sophisticated tools, and perhaps civilizations far more connected than we ever dreamed. And this is just the first map on our list. Just when you think the mystery of ancient Antarctic cartography couldn't get any stranger, along comes the Oronteus Finaeus map, a masterpiece of precision that defies the timeline even more boldly than Piri Reis's work. Created in 1531 by the French mathematician and cartographer Orontius Finaeus, this map doesn't just hint at Antarctica's coastline, it reveals the continent in stunning detail, complete with rivers, mountain ranges, and even what appear to be fertile valleys. Here's what stuns modern researchers. These features aren't visible on the surface. They're buried under miles of ice, yet they match modern sonar scans of Antarctica's subglacial topography with unsettling accuracy. Finaeus himself left a tantalizing clue in his notes. He claimed his map wasn't based on first-hand exploration, but was instead reconstructed from far older sources, ancient texts and charts passed down through centuries, perhaps even millennia. This raises an electrifying question: who originally mapped these landscapes and when? Geological evidence tells us Antarctica's last ice-free period ended roughly 6,000 years ago, long before any known civilization could have charted it. Yet the Orontius Finaeus map depicts the continent not as a blank, icy wasteland, but as a living, breathing landmass with flowing rivers and habitable terrain. The most baffling detail: the map places Antarctica's South Pole slightly off-center, a discrepancy that initially made scholars dismiss it as an error until modern research revealed something astonishing. Due to shifts in Earth's crust over millennia, the pole wasn't always where it is today. Finaeus's mistake might actually reflect Antarctica's geography as it appeared thousands of years earlier. This isn't just a lucky guess. It's a snapshot of a lost world, preserved in ink by a cartographer who likely had no idea just how ancient his sources truly were. Skeptics argue that these details could be coincidental or that Finaeus might have pieced together fragments from explorers' accounts, but the sheer specificity undermines that theory. How could medieval sailors have described subglacial mountain ranges or river valleys they couldn't see? The map even shows Antarctica split into two landmasses by a vast strait, a feature confirmed by modern science, as the continent's eastern and western halves sit on separate tectonic plates. What's truly humbling is realizing how much history might be missing from our textbooks. If maps like these are rooted in reality, they suggest the existence of a sophisticated pre-glacial civilization, one with the knowledge and technology to survey an entire continent. Were they seafarers who circumnavigated the globe, a lost culture that thrived before the ice claimed their world? Or could their maps have survived some cataclysm, handed down through generations until they reached figures like Phineas? Every line on this parchment is a thread pulling at the fabric of history, daring us to rethink what we know about humanity's past, and we're just getting started. The Zeno map doesn't just redraw the edges of the known world, it shatters them. Crafted in 1380 by Venetian noblemen Niccolò and Antonio Zeno, this faded parchment claims to document voyages made by their ancestors 2 centuries earlier. At first glance, it's a typical medieval map of the North Atlantic, but the closer you look, the more unsettling it becomes. Greenland appears not as a vague blob, but with a recognizable coastline, including fjords and inlets that match modern surveys. Even more startling, it shows fragments of North America's eastern seaboard, lands Europe wouldn't discover for another 100 years. So how did the Zenos get it so right? Their own writings add fuel to the fire. They insisted the map was based on logs from their great-great-grandfather's expeditions, led by a shadowy prince named Zichmni. According to their account, Zichmni's fleet sailed west into uncharted waters, encountering lands rich with forests, wildlife, and even settlements. Skeptics dismissed it as fantasy until archaeologists began unearthing Viking longhouses in Newfoundland, proving Norse explorers had reached North America by the year 1000. Suddenly, the Zeno map's details didn't seem so far-fetched, but here's where it gets weird. The map doesn't just align with Viking routes, it includes terrain even the Norse likely never saw, like precise details of Greenland's southern coast, which was already locked in ice by their era. Some researchers suggest the Zenos had access to even older sources, perhaps Phoenician or Basque sailing charts from civilizations that crossed the Atlantic long before Leif Erikson. Others point to the map's inclusion of Estatiland, a mythical kingdom described with such specificity that it mirrors accounts from indigenous oral traditions. The most haunting question isn't just who drew these coastlines, but why their knowledge vanished. If medieval Europeans had maps this accurate, why did Columbus sail blind? The answer might lie in the map's cryptic margins, where the Zenos hint that their ancestors' records were deliberately suppressed, lost in wars, church purges, or simply dismissed as heresy. What if this parchment isn't an outlier, but a surviving fragment of a once vast cartographic tradition? A tradition that dared to suggest the world was far larger and far older than the powers of the day wanted people to believe. One thing's certain, the Zeno map is more than a curiosity. It's a ripple in history's pond, proof that our timeline of exploration is missing entire currents of forgotten voyages. And as we'll see, it's far from the only map whispering secrets across the centuries. The Cantino Planisphere isn't just a map, it's a stolen artifact that rewrites the story of exploration. Created in 1502, this stunningly detailed chart was smuggled out of Portugal by an Italian spy named Alberto Cantino, who risked everything to get his hands on what was then considered state secrets. At first glance, it appears to be a typical Renaissance map, but the details tell a different story. Brazil's coastline is rendered with shocking accuracy, years before Pedro Álvares Cabral's official discovery in 1500. Even more perplexing, the map ventures deep into Africa's interior, depicting rivers, mountain ranges, and kingdoms that European explorers wouldn't document for decades. How could cartographers have known these landscapes so precisely? One theory points to Portugal's infamous policy of silence, where the crown suppressed discoveries to maintain a monopoly on trade routes. Leaked reports from sailors and spies may have secretly fed into maps like Cantino's, creating a shadow network of geographic knowledge. But there's a twist. Some of the African details align perfectly with Arab and Swahili trading maps, suggesting the Portuguese weren't just relying on their own voyages. They might have been piecing together a global jigsaw of information, borrowing from cultures they'd encountered or conquered. The map's depiction of Brazil raises even thornier questions. It shows the coastline bending eastward at exactly the right angle, with bays and capes placed where they actually exist. This wasn't guesswork, it was the work of someone who'd been there. Yet history credits no Portuguese expedition with charting Brazil before 1500. Could anonymous sailors have mapped it in secret? Or does this hint at earlier, unrecorded voyages by cultures whose achievements were erased? Perhaps the most haunting detail is the map's treatment of the Atlantic. It shows a vast, empty ocean between Europe and the Americas, but with one startling exception, a cluster of islands labeled Antillia. These phantom lands appear in multiple medieval maps, often linked to legends of a lost civilization. Were they pure myth, or could they represent real waypoints used by pre-Columbian explorers? The Cantino Planisphere doesn't answer these questions, it amplifies them, leaving us to wonder how much of history's discoveries were really rediscoveries. What's undeniable is that this smuggled masterpiece proves knowledge traveled faster and more dangerously than we've been taught. In an age when maps were worth kingdoms, the Cantino Planisphere was more than paper. It was a weapon, a treasure, and a silent witness to the secrets that shaped our world. And it's just one thread in a much larger tapestry of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. The Waldseemuller map doesn't just rename continents, it redraws reality. Published in 1507 by German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller, this masterpiece is often celebrated as the birth certificate of America, the first map to label the New World after explorer Amerigo Vespucci. But that's just the surface. Look closer and you'll find something that defies history itself. The Pacific Ocean, depicted with eerie precision a full decade before Europeans even knew it existed. How is this possible? Magellan wouldn't cross the Pacific until 1520, and Balboa wouldn't lay eyes on it until 1513. Yet here it is, stretching vast and blue between Asia and the Americas, its proportions uncannily accurate. Waldseemuller himself seemed baffled by his own work. In his notes, he admitted relying on various ancient and modern sources, including texts from Tolmi and accounts from Vespucci. But none of these could have revealed the Pacific's existence. So where did the information come from? One theory points to whispers from indigenous traders. Waldseemuller's map shows South America's western coast with surprising detail, including the Andes, a mountain range Europeans hadn't yet documented. Could Inca or Polynesian navigators have shared knowledge of these lands and seas? Another possibility is even more tantalizing. The map might preserve fragments of pre-Columbian voyages, perhaps by Chinese Admiral Zheng, his fleet, or even earlier, unknown explorers who crossed the Pacific and left traces in forgotten logs. The map's most haunting detail isn't its geography but its humility. By 1516, Waldseemuller had second thoughts, removing America from later editions after realizing Vespucci's claims might have been exaggerated. Yet the Pacific remained a silent challenge to history's timeline. If this wasn't a lucky guess, it suggests a shadow network of global knowledge, one that knew the world's full shape long before textbooks say we did. What's chilling is how much might have been lost. Waldseemuller's original print run of 1,000 copies nearly vanished. Only one survives today, rediscovered in a German castle in 1901. It's a fragile relic of a time when maps weren't just tools but revelations, pieced together from secrets we're still trying to decipher. And it begs the question, if Waldseemuller had access to truths we've since forgotten, how many other maps held answers that slipped through our fingers? The Bewatchatch map doesn't just challenge history, it fractures it. Published in 1737 by French geographer Philippe Bewatchatch, this controversial chart shows Antarctica not as a single frozen mass but as two distinct landmasses separated by a wide channel. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as pure speculation, until modern sonar scans in the 1900s revealed something astonishing. Antarctica is in fact two separate landmasses, divided by the Transantarctic Mountains and buried under miles of ice. Bewatchatch's guess was off by mere kilometers in some places, matching the subglacial topography with unsettling precision. How could an 18th century cartographer know what lay beneath an ice sheet that had existed for millennia? Bewatchatch himself claimed his work was based on ancient sources, though he never specified which ones. Some researchers point to the possibility of lost Phoenician or Polynesian voyages, cultures known for their seafaring prowess but not typically credited with Antarctic exploration. Others suggest even more startling explanations. Could Bewatchatch have stumbled upon fragments of knowledge from a pre-glacial civilization, one that witnessed Antarctica before the ice claimed it? The map's critics argue it's just a lucky coincidence, a byproduct of Bewatchatch's theoretical approach to geography. He was known for filling gaps in maps with hypothetical landforms, extrapolating from known mountain ranges and river systems. But here's the problem: Antarctica's bifurcation isn't a simple symmetry. The eastern and western halves sit on separate tectonic plates with radically different geological histories. Guessing that correctly would be like reconstructing a shattered vase without ever seeing the pieces. Even more intriguing is what the map leaves out. Unlike later Antarctic maps cluttered with speculative coastlines, Bewatchatch's version shows startling restraint: only the landmasses, no invented details. It's as if he was copying something old and exact, resisting the urge to embellish. This raises a haunting possibility. What if his ancient sources weren't just texts, but precise surveys from a time when Antarctica's rivers still flowed? The implications ripple far beyond cartography. If Bewatchatch's map is rooted in reality, it suggests that Antarctica's ice-free past wasn't just a geological phase. It was a window when humans, or someone, could have walked its shores and charted its contours. That knowledge, if it existed, would rewrite not just the history of exploration but the timeline of civilization itself. And as we'll see, this isn't the only map whispering of worlds that shouldn't exist. The Vineland map isn't just a historical artifact, it's a detective story inked on parchment. Discovered in 1957, this yellowed document claims to date back to 1440. Depicting not only Europe and Africa, but also a mysterious landmass labeled Vineland west of Greenland. If authentic, it would be the oldest known map showing Norse settlements in North America, predating Columbus by over half a century. But from the moment it surfaced, the map has been shrouded in controversy, with scholars divided into two camps: those who see it as a smoking gun of Viking exploration, and those convinced it's an elaborate 20th century forgery. What makes this debate so heated? The map's depiction of Vineland aligns uncannily with the sagas of Leif Erikson, the Norse explorer said to have reached North America around the year 1000. It shows a jagged coastline eerily reminiscent of Newfoundland, where archaeologists later uncovered Viking ruins at Elance Ox Meadows. Proponents argue the map's medieval Latin script and wormhole patterns in the vellum suggest genuine age. But skeptics point to glaring red flags. The ink contains traces of anatase, a titanium compound not commonly used in medieval pigments, and the handwriting shows quirks more typical of modern calligraphy than 15th century scribes. The plot thickens when you trace the map's modern history. It appeared mysteriously in Spain, bound inside a crumbling 15th century book, with no record of its existence before the mid-20th century. Some researchers suspect it was crafted to capitalize on the excitement surrounding the Elance Ox Meadows discoveries, while others propose a darker theory, that it's a genuine medieval copy of an even older Viking map, deliberately tainted with modern materials to discredit it. Why? Because proof of pre-Columbian transatlantic voyages would append not just history books but national myths, particularly Italy's pride in Columbus as the discoverer of America. The most tantalizing clue might be what the map doesn't show. Unlike later European maps cluttered with mythical islands, the Vineland map presents a sparse, practical coastline, the kind a seafarer like Erikson might have sketched for navigation. It lacks the flourishes of a forger's imagination, focusing instead on landmarks a Viking would recognize: promontories for shelter, shallows to avoid, and rivers leading inland. Whether hoax or hidden truth, the Vineland map forces us to confront how fragile history can be. If it's real, It's a fragile thread connecting us to an era when Norse longships cast shadows on American shores. If it's fake, it's a testament to how fiercely we cling to or contest the stories that define us. One thing's certain, this isn't just a map, it's a mirror reflecting our obsession with rewriting the past. The Cangnido map doesn't just stretch borders, it collapses time itself. Created in 1402 by Korean cartographers, this sprawling masterpiece shows a world far more connected than history books suggest. Europe, Africa, the Middle East, all rendered with startling detail decades before Portuguese ships rounded the Cape of Good Hope. The precision is staggering. Africa's bulbous southern tip appears centuries before Dyers or da Gama charted it, while the Mediterranean coastline mirrors reality with an accuracy that defies medieval limitations. How could a 15th-century Korean court have possessed such global knowledge? The map's creators left tantalizing clues in their notes. They credited countless sources, including Arab merchant charts and Yuan dynasty archives, hinting at a vast intercontinental exchange of geographic data. Trade routes like the Silk Road weren't just pathways for spices and silk. They were information superhighways carrying maps and navigational lore between Baghdad, Beijing, and beyond. Some scholars believe Muslim traders who dominated Indian Ocean commerce may have shared knowledge of Africa's shape with their East Asian counterparts. Others point to the Mongol Empire's brief unification of Eurasia, which could have allowed geographic secrets to flow freely across continents. But the Cangnido holds deeper mysteries. Its depiction of Europe, though crude, includes rivers and mountain ranges absent from Western maps of the same era. The Nile bends at the correct angle, and the Arabian Peninsula flares wide, details unlikely to be guesswork. Even more perplexing is what the map omits. There's no mythical southern landmass or sea monsters, just pragmatic coastlines and trade hubs. This suggests the cartographers were working from first-hand accounts rather than legends. The most electrifying theory involves a lost chapter of exploration. Chinese Admiral Zheng, his legendary treasure fleets were crisscrossing the Indian Ocean around this time, possibly reaching as far as Africa. Could fragments of their voyages have influenced the Cangnido? The timing aligns, and the map's emphasis on ports aligns with Zheng, his diplomatic missions. Yet the map also shows places even his fleets might not have visited, whispering of other, unnamed explorers whose journeys vanished from record. What's haunting is realizing how much we've underestimated pre-modern globalization. The Cangnido map isn't a fluke, it's proof that medieval civilizations shared knowledge more freely than we imagined, painting a world far smaller and more interconnected than historians once believed. And if that's true, how many other maps and stories were lost to war, time, or deliberate erasure? Claudius Tolmi's maps are a paradox wrapped in parchment. Created in the 2nd century, these ancient Greek charts revolutionized geography by introducing the concepts of latitude and longitude, a grid system so advanced it wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. But look closer and the cracks in history begin to show. Sri Lanka sprawls twice its true size, the Indian Ocean pinches unnaturally narrow, and Scandinavia twists like a misshapen puzzle piece. These aren't just innocent mistakes. They're fingerprints of something far more intriguing, the ghostly presence of maps that predated Ptolemy by centuries, perhaps even millennia. Who were the original architects of this knowledge? Ptolemy himself gives us a clue in his writings. He openly credited the ancients for much of his data, referencing sources like the Greek explorer Marinus of Tyre and even older, unnamed Phoenician or Babylonian texts. These lost documents, he implied, contained precise coordinates and sailing distances information that couldn't have been gathered in a single lifetime. The distortions in his maps make eerie sense when you consider they might be copies of copies, like a game of geographic telephone where each iteration introduces slight warps. Take the case of Sri Lanka. Tolmi's exaggerated version aligns suspiciously well with ancient Indian and Sumerian texts that describe a legendary island called Tamrapani, a land of riches said to lie far to the south. Was this distortion the result of myth blending with measurement, or could it reflect a time when sea levels were lower, making the island appear larger to early mariners? Even more baffling is his treatment of Africa. Ptolemy's maps correctly show the continent wrapping southward, but they also hint at a land bridge connecting it to Southeast Asia, a feature that mirrors Ice Age geography when lowered oceans exposed vast continental shelves. The real shocker isn't Ptolemy's errors but his accuracy. His latitude markings for Mediterranean cities like Alexandria and Rome are off by less than a degree, a margin so slim it implies the use of advanced instruments like astrolabes or armillary spheres. Yet these tools supposedly didn't exist in the cultures he borrowed from. This leaves us with a haunting possibility. What if the ancients Ptolemy relied on weren't just early Greeks or Babylonians, but inheritors of a far older scientific tradition, one that mapped the world with tools we've yet to rediscover? Skeptics argue that Ptolemy's precision can be chalked up to educated guesses and accumulated sailor lore, but that doesn't explain why his most glaring mistakes cluster around specific regions, like the Indian Ocean, where ancient trade routes would have allowed knowledge to pass between civilizations. Could these distortions actually be frozen moments in time, preserving how the world looked to sailors of a forgotten age? The maps whisper of a time when geography wasn't just science but a mosaic of stories, each trader and explorer adding a tile to the grand design. What's undeniable is that Ptolemy didn't work in a vacuum. His maps are palimpsests, their deepest layers written by hands we'll never know. They challenge us to wonder how much of human history is built on foundations we've yet to uncover. And if a second-century scholar had access to such sophisticated data, what other treasures might have been lost to fire, flood, or the slow erosion of time? Every line on these ancient charts isn't just ink. It's a bridge to a shadow world of knowledge waiting to be crossed. The Hadji Atmed map doesn't just push boundaries, it obliterates them. Crafted in 1559 by the Ottoman cartographer Hadji Atmed, this vibrant parchment is a masterpiece of precision and a thorn in the side of conventional history. At first glance, it's a typical 16th century depiction of the known world, but the western edge of North America tells a different story. There, etched in delicate ink, lies a coastline so accurate it includes features like the Gulf of Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, landmarks Europeans wouldn't document for another 2 centuries. This isn't just a lucky guess, it's a geographic snapshot that shouldn't exist. How could an Ottoman scholar in Istanbul possibly know the contours of a continent half a world away, especially when Spain's own maps of the Pacific Northwest were still blank? Atmed himself offers a cryptic clue in his annotations. He credits the charts of the Masters of the Sea, a phrase that sparked decades of debate. Some scholars believe he was referencing lost Portuguese or Arab sailing records, perhaps from explorers who ventured into the Pacific but kept their discoveries secret to protect trade routes. Others point to something even more radical, the possibility of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, where indigenous peoples of the Americas or Pacific Islanders shared their knowledge with the wider world long before Columbus set sail. The map's depiction of Alaska is particularly haunting. It shows a jagged coastline with bays and peninsulas that align almost perfectly with modern surveys, details impossible to infer from vague travelers' tales. Even more puzzling, the map labels this region the land of the white-haired people, a phrase that echoes indigenous Alaskan oral histories describing early encounters with light-haired tribes. Could this be a reference to the mysterious Dorset people, an Arctic culture that vanished before European contact? Or does it hint at even earlier, unrecorded meetings between continents? Skeptics argue Atmed might have pieced together his map from rumors of Russian expeditions, but here's the catch. The first Russian explorers wouldn't reach Alaska until the 1700s. The timeline simply doesn't add up. Another theory suggests he borrowed from Chinese treasure fleets, which some believe may have reached the Americas before Columbus. Yet the map lacks the stylistic hallmarks of Ming cartography, leaving its true origins shrouded in mystery. The most tantalizing possibility is that Atmed accessed a dying thread of ancient knowledge, a web of geographic data woven by sailors, traders, and explorers whose names are lost to time. Perhaps his masters of the sea were Phoenicians, whose maritime prowess was legendary, or Polynesians, whose star-guided voyages spanned the Pacific. Whatever the source, the Hadji Atmed map forces us to confront a glaring hole in history's narrative. If this level of detail existed in 1559, how much more was known and then forgotten about our planet's true shape? What's chilling is realizing how fragile this knowledge was. Atmed's map was nearly lost, surviving as just one of 2 known copies. It's a fragile testament to a world where borders were fluid and secrets lurked in every port. And it begs the question, if one cartographer in Istanbul could glimpse Alaska's shores centuries early, what other truths might still be hiding in the margins of forgotten maps? The Mercator map is far more than a navigational tool. It's a vault of forgotten geography. Published in 1569 by Flemish cartographer Gerardus Mercator, this revolutionary work introduced the projection that still bears his name, allowing sailors to plot straight-line courses across curved oceans. But hidden in its northern reaches lies a puzzle that defies explanation. A sprawling landmass labeled Hyperborea, a place ancient Greeks described as a paradise beyond the north wind. Most historians dismiss it as myth, but the map's chilling accuracy elsewhere raises an unsettling question. What if this legend was rooted in real Arctic exploration lost to time? Mercator didn't invent Hyperborea, he borrowed it. In his notes, he cited a now-lost text called the Inventio Fortunata, a 14th-century travelogue claiming to document a voyage to the Arctic. According to fragments, the anonymous author described a magnetic mountain at the North Pole surrounded by 4 continents, a geography Mercator meticulously reproduced. Skeptics argue this was pure fantasy, but modern sonar reveals something startling. The Arctic ocean floor does indeed have submerged ridges radiating outward like spokes, eerily mirroring Mercator's depiction. Could the Inventio Fortunata have preserved garbled memories of a time when the Arctic was more accessible? The map's details grow even stranger. Hyperborea isn't drawn as a vague blob, but as a defined landmass with rivers and mountain ranges. Even more perplexing, Mercator shows the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard with uncanny precision islands Europe wouldn't officially discover for another century. This wasn't guesswork. Dutch whalers later found Svalbard using Mercator's coordinates, suggesting his sources held tangible knowledge. Some researchers point to medieval Norse expeditions, like the voyage of Venetian explorer Niccolo Zeno, who claimed to have mapped the Arctic in the 1300s. Others speculate about Phoenician traders, whose seafaring prowess might have taken them farther north than records show. The most tantalizing clue lies in Mercator's treatment of Greenland. Unlike his contemporaries who depicted it as a misshapen peninsula, he drew it as an island, a fact not confirmed until the 20th century. This level of precision hints at access to ancient sailing charts, perhaps passed down through Viking or even earlier Celtic maritime networks. If so, Hyperborea might not be mere myth but a distorted echo of real lands, like the now submerged Doggerland or Arctic territories that were ice-free during warmer prehistoric periods. What's haunting is realizing how much Arctic knowledge has vanished. Medieval texts speak of Thule, a distant northern civilization visited by Pythias of Massalia in the 4th century BC. Inuit oral histories describe trading with fair-haired men in times when the ice receded. Could these fragments point to a lost epoch of Arctic exploration, one that left traces in maps like Mercator's before being erased by the Little Ice Age? The map doesn't just challenge history, it suggests a world where the poles were once gateways, not barriers, and where the lines between legend and reality blur in the frozen north. Mercator may never have known the truth behind his sources, but his map remains a frozen whisper of something deeper, the possibility that ancient seafarers ventured into realms we've since written off as impossible, their stories surviving only as myths until a careful cartographer inked them back into existence. The De Verga world map doesn't just sketch continents, it unveils a medieval world, far more sophisticated than we've imagined. Created between 1411 and 1415 by Venetian cartographer Albertin de Verga, this circular masterpiece is a time capsule of geographic knowledge that shouldn't exist for its era. At first glance, its continents appear crude, but the closer you look, the more unsettling the details become. Africa bends southward with a recognizable horn, the Mediterranean curls with approximate accuracy, and the Indian Ocean opens wide. All features European maps wouldn't standardize for another century. Even more startling, the map reaches deep into Asia, depicting the Malay Peninsula and Java with contours that echo Marco Polo's descriptions. But here's the catch: Polo's accounts were vague travelogues, not precise surveys. So how did de Verga achieve such startling accuracy? The map's secrets lie in its hybrid nature. Unlike typical medieval mappa mundi filled with biblical imagery, the de Verga map is startlingly secular, focused on trade routes and coastlines. Scholars have spotted Arabic script near the Red Sea and Persian Gulf, evidence it borrowed from Islamic cartography, which was centuries ahead of Europe in geographic precision. But that only explains part of the puzzle. The map's treatment of the Far East includes islands like Java Major and Java Minor, names Polo never used. These labels match ancient Javanese chronicles and Chinese sailing charts, suggesting de Verga had access to a web of knowledge stretching from Venice to the Spice Islands. What's truly baffling is the map's spherical projection. Most medieval European maps were flat or symbolic, but de Verga's work presents Earth as a perfect circle with graduated latitude lines, a concept Tolmi had proposed, but that wouldn't be widely adopted until the Renaissance. This wasn't just artistic choice. The map's geometry hints at an understanding of curvature, possibly gleaned from Arab astronomers who'd preserved Greek mathematics. Some researchers speculate the map's circular form mirrors ancient Tibetan or Buddhist cosmological diagrams, implying a cross-continental exchange of ideas long before the age of exploration. The most tantalizing clue lies in what's missing. Unlike later maps cluttered with mythical beasts or the Garden of Eden, de Verga's work is ruthlessly practical. It shows caravan routes through Central Asia, river systems in India, and even hints at the monsoon patterns Arab sailors used to cross the Indian Ocean. This isn't the work of an armchair scholar. It's a mosaic of first-hand accounts, pieced together from merchants, diplomats, and perhaps even spies in the Venetian Republic's vast intelligence network. Who were these unnamed informants? Venetian archives mention a secretive guild of mapmakers who traded in sailors' charts. often confiscated from foreign vessels or purchased at exorbitant prices in Alexandria or Constantinople. Could the Verga have been part of this shadowy trade? The map's survival adds another layer of mystery. Only a single fragment exists today, discovered in a private collection in 1911, its edges charred as if someone tried to burn it. What's haunting is realizing how much global knowledge circulated behind the scenes in the Middle Ages. While Europe's official maps still showed Jerusalem at the center of a flat earth, masters like de Verga were quietly assembling a truer picture, one stitched together from Silk Road whispers, Arab star charts, and the logbooks of unnamed explorers. This map doesn't just redraw geography. It rewrites the story of how the world came to be known, revealing an era when trade routes carried not just spices and silk, but secrets that could reshape reality itself. The Jean Rots Atlas doesn't just hint at hidden voyages, it paints a coastline that shouldn't exist. Crafted in 1542 for England's King Henry VIII, this lavish collection of nautical charts was the work of French hydrographer Jean Rots, a man with access to secrets that defied the era's geographic knowledge. Tucked among its pages lies the real shocker, a landmass labeled Java La Grande, its northern coastline mirroring Australia's with uncanny precision 2 centuries before Captain Cook's discovery in 1770. This isn't a vague squiggle or mythical continent. Rots's map shows bays, capes, and even what appears to be the Gulf of Carpentaria, features no European had officially documented. So how did a 16th century cartographer sketch a continent the world supposedly didn't know about? Rots himself offers a tantalizing clue in his dedication to Henry VIII. He mentions relying on the most secret charts of Portugal and the East, a nod to the cutthroat world of Renaissance espionage. Portugal guarded its trade routes fiercely, punishing leaks with imprisonment or worse. Yet somehow, details of Terra Australis, the legendary southern land, leaked into Rots's work. Some historians point to the Portuguese colony of Malacca, where sailors may have heard whispers from Indonesian or Macassan traders who regularly visited Australia's northern shores. Others speculate about shipwrecked Portuguese caravels like the reported mahogany ship Mystery along Victoria's coast, though no physical evidence survives. The map's accuracy is what stuns modern researchers. Rots's Java La Grande aligns with real Australian geography too precisely for coincidence. The western bulge matches the Kimberley region, while the eastern indent mirrors the Gulf of Carpentaria, features impossible to guess from vague sailors' tales. Even more telling, the map shows a break in the coastline near modern-day Darwin, where the Clarence Strait separates Melville Island from the mainland. This level of detail suggests first-hand observation, not myth, but here's where it gets stranger. Rots wasn't the only one who knew. Other maps from the same era, like the Vallard Atlas of 1547, show similar coastlines, some even labeling the land with names like Terre des Perroquets, Land of Parrots, a fitting description for Australia's avian-rich north. These parallels hint at a shadow network of knowledge, perhaps passed among European cartographers through back channels or stolen from Arabic or Asian sources. The Portuguese, in particular, had a reputation for suppressing discoveries to maintain monopolies. Could their navigators have mapped Australia's north during covert voyages, only to bury the records? The most compelling evidence might come from the land itself. Aboriginal oral histories from the Kimberley and Arnhem Land speak of encounters with ghost people in strange boats, light-skinned visitors who came and went before the British arrived. These stories, passed down for generations, align eerily with the timeline of Portuguese exploration in the Indian Ocean. Could Rots's map be the smoking gun of these unrecorded contacts? What's haunting is realizing how much history might have been rewritten to suit colonial narratives. If Rotz's atlas preserves fragments of pre-Cook exploration, it means Australia's discovery wasn't a singular event but a slow unveiling with chapters torn out. The map doesn't just challenge timelines, it forces us to listen for echoes in the stories of First Nations peoples and the cryptic annotations of cartographers who dared to chart the unknown. And as we'll see, this isn't the last map to whisper of lands found and forgotten. The Selden map shatters the myth that Chinese cartography was inward-looking or primitive. Painted on delicate rice paper in 1608, this vibrant masterpiece was rediscovered in 1958, tucked away in Oxford's Bodleian Library, mislabeled for centuries as just another decorative scroll. Unroll it, and the truth spills forth. A sprawling network of maritime routes stretching from Japan's jagged shores to India's Malabar coast, each line inked with precision that rivals modern nautical charts. This isn't just a map, it's a confession, proof that Ming Dynasty merchants knew the Asian seas better than Europe's greatest explorers dared to dream. What makes the Selden map so revolutionary? Unlike European maps of the era, crammed with mythical beasts and biblical references, this Chinese document is ruthlessly pragmatic. It shows sailing times between ports, monsoon wind patterns, and even hidden shoals knowledge that could only come from generations of sailors braving these waters. The coastlines are staggeringly accurate. The Malay Peninsula curves at the perfect angle, the Ryukyu Islands scatter like pebbles where they truly lie, and the Gulf of Tonkin mirrors satellite imagery. This level of detail wasn't guesswork. It was hard-won intelligence passed down through families of merchants and navigators whose names history forgot. The map's origins are as mysterious as its survival. No earlier drafts exist, no court records mention its creation, and its painter remains anonymous. Scholars suspect it was crafted in the bustling port of Quanzhou, a melting pot where Arab, Indian, and Southeast Asian traders exchanged not just goods but secrets. The ink holds clues traces of pigments used only in Fujian province, while the paper's fiber matches scrolls from Ming bureaucratic archives. Was this a smuggled official document? A merchant's private treasure copied from some guarded imperial atlas, the map's margins whisper of lost sources, with notes referencing older charts and master navigators' reckonings. Most electrifying is what the Selden map reveals about China's forgotten maritime empire. While European maps of the time still depicted Asia as a vague eastern blob, this scroll lays bare a web of trade routes that fed Ming prosperity. It shows the Silk Road of the Sea, a string of ports from Nagasaki to Malacca where Chinese porcelain, spices, and silks flowed. But here's the twist: many of these routes were technically illegal. The Ming had banned private overseas trade by the 1500s, forcing merchants into shadow networks. The Selden map, then, isn't just geography, it's a black market blueprint, evidence of a thriving underground economy that defied imperial decrees. The real enigma isn't the map's accuracy but its loneliness. Why is it the only one of its kind? Ming records speak of marine atlases burned during anti-commerce purges, and Jesuit missionaries wrote of seeing detailed Chinese world maps that later vanished. Could the Selden map be a lone survivor of a systematic erasure? Its very existence hints at a parallel history, one where Chinese junks might have charted distant coasts long before European caravels, their achievements scrubbed from official memory. When you trace the Selden map's routes with a modern finger, you're not just following ink, you're retracing the footsteps of unnamed admirals, smugglers, and stargazers who mapped the world on their own terms. Their legacy isn't in history books, it's hidden in the whispers of monsoons and the tides they mastered, a testament to the knowledge that thrives, even when empires try to bury it. The King James world map isn't just a relic, it's a riddle wrapped in parchment, created in 1502 for the court of Portugal's King Manuel I. This Catalan masterpiece walks a razor's edge between hard geography and haunting legend. At first glance, it's remarkably precise. Brazil's eastern bulge curves exactly where it should, and Africa's western coast mirrors reality with near-modern accuracy. But then your eye catches the anomalous phantom islands scattered across the Atlantic, labeled with names like Antillia and Roilo, landmasses that appear on no modern chart. Were these cartographic errors wishful thinking, or something far more intriguing, echoes of real places that vanished beneath the waves? What makes these phantom islands so compelling is their persistence. They're not one-off mistakes. Similar landmasses appear in multiple medieval maps, often in the same general vicinity west of Europe and Africa. The King James map's version of Antillia even matches descriptions from 14th century Venetian navigators who spoke of an island of 7 cities settled by fleeing Iberian bishops. Skeptics dismiss these as sailors' myths, but modern oceanography adds a twist. The map's phantom islands cluster along the mid-Atlantic ridge, a submerged mountain chain where volcanic activity could have created temporary islands that later sank, or where ancient sailors might have mistaken dense fog banks for land. The map's origins deepen the mystery. It was crafted by an anonymous Catalan cartographer, likely working from Portuguese royal archives stuffed with classified exploration reports. Portugal guarded its discoveries fiercely, often planting false details in public maps to mislead rivals. Yet the King James map's accuracy suggests it was an insider document meant only for the king's eyes. This raises a tantalizing possibility. Could its phantom islands be coded references to real places, perhaps uncharted Atlantic waypoints used by Portuguese navigators? There's precedent. The Azores, once considered mythical, were later confirmed as real. The most haunting detail lies in the map's treatment of Brazil. Unlike contemporary charts that depicted it as a vague extension of Asia, this map shows it as a distinct landmass years before Cabral's official discovery. Even more startling, it hints at the Amazon's mouth, a feature Europeans wouldn't document for decades. This level of precision suggests the cartographer had access to suppressed reports, perhaps from clandestine voyages the Crown never acknowledged. What's truly unsettling is realizing how much history might be hiding in plain sight. The King James map's blend of fact and fantasy forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Ancient mariners may have known far more than they shared, their knowledge fragmented by time, politics, and the sea's relentless hunger for secrets. Every phantom island on this parchment isn't just a cartographer's whim, it's a question mark floating on the tides of history, daring us to wonder what else has been lost. The Bianco world map isn't just a chart, it's a graveyard of lost voyages. Painted in 1436 by Venetian navigator Andrea Bianco, this faded parchment stretches from the familiar coasts of Europe deep into the Atlantic's uncharted void, where phantom islands float like echoes of ships' bells. The most tantalizing of these is Antillia, a sprawling landmass labeled with a cryptic note. Here the ships of Portugal ventured west and did not return. At first glance, it could be another medieval myth, but the map's precision elsewhere raises a haunting question. What if these islands weren't imagined but remembered? Bianco was no armchair cartographer, a seasoned sailor who'd logged decades in the Mediterranean and along Africa's west coast. His maps were tools, not decorations. His depiction of Antillia isn't a vague blob but a rectangular landmass with 7 marked cities, a detail that mirrors Iberian legends of 7 bishops who fled Muslim conquest in the 8th century. supposedly founding a secret Christian kingdom across the sea. Skeptics dismiss this as folklore, but modern oceanographers note something peculiar. Antillia's position aligns with the Horseshoe Seamounts, a submerged archipelago 600 miles southwest of Portugal. During the last ice age, when sea levels were lower, some of these peaks may have broken the surface. Could Bianco's map preserve an ancient memory of real lands that vanished beneath the waves? The clues grow stranger. Along the map's edge, Bianco scribbled fragments of sailors' lore tales of green shores beyond the sunset and storms that blew ships off course to lands where the stars fell upside down. These aren't generic fantasies. They match accounts from Basque and Breton fishermen who secretly plied the North Atlantic centuries before Columbus, following whale migrations to rich fishing grounds near Newfoundland. Venetian archives even contain a 15th century report of a ship blown off course in 1427, returning with tales of a western land where the crew traded glass beads for strange furs. The ship's name lost to fire, its logs vanished. Only Bianco's map hints at what they might have seen. What chills historians isn't just the map's accuracy, but its timing. Created decades before Columbus, it shows the Atlantic not as an empty abyss, but as a highway dotted with waypoints, exactly how experienced sailors would visualize it. Even more telling, Bianco's Antillia isn't alone. Nearby floats Satanas, an isle marked with warnings of devils and tempests. To modern eyes, this sounds like superstition, but nautical archaeologists recognize the description. The Sargasso Sea, a region of eerie calm and floating seaweed, lies roughly where Bianco placed Satanas. Medieval sailors feared its windless waters, where ships could stall for weeks, a hellish experience that might explain the demonic label. The real mystery isn't whether Bianco believed in these islands, but why so many maps agreed on their location. From the Catalan Atlas to the Behaim Globe, Antillia appears consistently southwest of Portugal, often with the same seven-city legend. This isn't random copying, it's a pattern suggesting a shared source. Some researchers point to the lost Portolan charts, navigational aids rumored to be so accurate that Mediterranean states guarded them like gold. Others speculate about Arab traders who may have collected Atlantic lore from Norse or Celtic sailors and passed it to Venetian mapmakers through Sicilian intermediaries. The most electrifying possibility, that Antillia was never an island at all, but a garbled report of the Americas. When Columbus set sail in 1492, he carried maps showing Antillia roughly where the Caribbean lies. Coincidence, or did Bianco and his peers have access to whispers of a world beyond the horizon? One explored by unnamed mariners whose stories survived only as cartographic ghosts. The map's final irony lies in its legacy. Today, the Antilles Islands dot the Caribbean, their name a silent tribute to Bianco's phantom land. Somewhere between myth and memory, the truth still waits, as vast and uncharted as the sea itself. The Agathodemon map isn't just another lost relic. It's a ghost in the machine of ancient geography. Mentioned in fragments of Roman texts from the 1st century, this mysterious document was said to depict the world's rivers and mountains with a level of precision that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. Imagine a grid system so exact it could plot the course of the Nile or the peaks of the Alps with near scientific accuracy, centuries before such techniques were thought possible. If this map truly existed, it wouldn't just rewrite the history of cartography, it would force us to reconsider the entire intellectual landscape of ancient Rome. What makes this lost map so tantalizing? The few surviving descriptions claim it was the work of Agathodemon, a shadowy figure whose name means good spirit in Greek. Some scholars believe he might have been a compiler, stitching together knowledge from Alexandrian libraries or even older Egyptian or Mesopotamian sources. The map's alleged grid system echoes the work of Tolmi, but with a twist. It supposedly included longitudinal and latitudinal lines, a concept Rome's engineers applied to their roads and aqueducts but never to maps, at least not in any surviving examples. Could this have been a secret military tool reserved for emperors and generals, or was it a scholarly masterpiece lost when libraries burned? The most electrifying clue comes from an unexpected source: Roman mining operations. In Spain and Britain, archaeologists have found meticulously surveyed tunnels that align with geographic features miles away, suggesting the empire had access to advanced topographical data. If they could map underground rivers and ore veins with such precision, why wouldn't they apply that knowledge above ground? The Agathodemon map might have been the missing link, a master blueprint of the ancient world, used to coordinate everything from trade routes to troop movements. Yet the map's absence speaks volumes. Not a single fragment survives, and even its descriptions are vague, buried in footnotes of texts like Pliny the Elder's Natural History. This raises a darker possibility. Was it deliberately destroyed? Rome's elites were notorious for hoarding knowledge. Emperors like Augustus maintained private archives of maps and exploration reports, while public versions were often distorted to obscure strategic secrets. If the Agathodemon map was as accurate as claimed, its disappearance might not have been an accident but a calculated act of control. The real question isn't just whether the map existed, it's what its existence would imply about Rome's understanding of the world. Could a civilization that built roads straight across mountains and deserts have secretly mapped continents beyond their borders? Some researchers point to the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a 1st-century guide to trade routes as far as India, which mentions charts of the ocean's bones. Were these the Agathodemon map's siblings, lost to time? What's haunting is realizing how much ancient knowledge might have vanished in the collapse of empires. The Agathodemon map isn't just a missing artifact, it's a symbol of the fragile threads that connect us to the past. Every line rumored to be on its surface whispers the same thing: that history's greatest discoveries might still be waiting, not in the ground, but in the gaps between what we've been told and what was really known. The Martellus map doesn't just mislead, it mesmerizes. Created in 1491 by German cartographer Henricus Martellus, this sprawling masterpiece was more than a navigational tool for Christopher Columbus. It was a vision of the world that warped reality itself. At first glance, the map's most notorious flaw leaps out. Asia stretched grotesquely eastward, compressing the Pacific to a narrow strip. This distortion famously fed Columbus's delusion that he'd reached India when he stumbled upon the Caribbean. But here's the paradox: while the map's eastern half is a hall of mirrors, its southern half is eerily precise. Africa's coastline curves around the Cape of Good Hope with near-modern accuracy, complete with the correct angle at the southern tip. The problem: Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias wouldn't round the Cape until 1488, 3 years before this map was drawn. So how could Martellus have known? Theories swirl like ocean currents. Some scholars point to clandestine leaks from Lisbon's royal archives, where Portugal guarded its discoveries like state secrets. Others suggest Martellus had access to Arab or Swahili trading charts, as Indian Ocean merchants had likely mapped Africa's southern reaches long before Europeans. The most tantalizing clue lies in the map's shadows. Hidden in its margins are faint notes referencing ancient sea kings and Ethiopian pilots, hints that Martellus might have pieced together his work from fragments of forgotten maritime lore. This wasn't just copying, it was cartographic archaeology, reconstructing lost knowledge from whispers traded in Alexandria's docks or Venice's back alleys. What's truly baffling is the map's split personality. How could the same hand that botched Asia's proportions nail Africa's southern hook? The answer might lie in Martellus's sources. For Asia, he likely relied on Tolmi's ancient texts, which vastly underestimated Earth's size. But for Africa, he seems to have switched to something far more current, perhaps smuggled Portuguese reports or charts from Arab navigators who'd sailed the Indian Ocean for centuries. The map even shows Madagascar with startling accuracy, an island Europeans wouldn't officially discover for another decade. This inconsistency isn't a mistake, it's a snapshot of a world in transition, where medieval myths collided with bleeding-edge intelligence. The map's influence on Columbus is the cruelest irony. Martellus's stretched Asia wasn't just a harmless error. It was a siren song that lured the Genos explorer westward. Columbus's personal copy of the map, now lost, reportedly had his frantic margin notes calculating distances based on Martellus's flawed scale. Yet the same map that sent him astray also contained truths he ignored. Had Columbus paid attention to its African details, he might have realized how much the world still had to reveal. The real mystery isn't just where Martellus got his facts, it's why some were so right while others were catastrophically wrong. This parchment is a palimpsest of human ambition, where knowledge and guesswork bled together to shape history's course. It reminds us that every map is a battleground not just of ink and vellum, but of secrets, lies, and the irresistible urge to fill in the blanks. The Deceliers map isn't just a work of art, it's a fever dream of the unknown. Painted in 1550 as a gift for France's King Henry II, this lavish masterpiece glows with gold leaf and vivid pigments, depicting a world teetering between reality and fantasy. At its southern edge sprawls Terra Australis, a vast continent crawling with winged serpents, dog-headed men, and cities of gold. To modern eyes, it's pure myth. But what if these bizarre details weren't just imagination run wild, but scrambled echoes of real encounters with lands Europe hadn't yet claimed? What makes the Deceliers map so unsettling is its duality. While Europe and Africa are rendered with surprising accuracy, Terra Australis is a carnival of the uncanny. Giant ants haul gold nuggets from rivers, while horned cyclopes stalk forests straight out of a medieval bestiary. Yet nestled among these monsters are oddly precise geographic features, a bay that mirrors Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria, a mountain range that aligns with New Zealand's Southern Alps. This isn't random doodling. The map's creator, royal cartographer Pierre Deceliers, was known for blending hard data with hearsay, stitching together sailors' tales, stolen Portuguese charts, and perhaps even whispers from indigenous informants. The key to decoding this puzzle lies in the map's annotations. Tiny French scripts labeled Terra Australis as the land of parrots and spices, a phrase echoing Marco Polo's accounts of Java, but also matching early Dutch descriptions of Australia's northern coast. Even more telling, one city marked Locatch appears in multiple medieval maps, often linked to legends of a lost Asian kingdom. Some researchers argue this could be a garbled reference to the Inca Empire, whose gold-rich cities might have inspired the El Dorado myths that bled into cartography. Others point to Aboriginal Australian trade networks, which stretched to Indonesia and could have carried descriptions of the continent's interior back to European ears. The map's true enigma isn't its creatures but its confidence. Unlike tentative sketches of Terra Australis in other works, Deceliers presents it as solid fact, complete with place names and topographical details. This boldness suggests he believed in his sources, whether they were distorted reports from Portuguese spies in the Moluccas, misinterpreted Chinese scrolls describing distant lands, or even surviving fragments of knowledge from the ancient Austronesian sailors who first settled the Pacific. What's haunting is realizing how much history might be hiding in these fantasies. When Dutch explorers finally reached Australia in the 1600s, they described creatures just as strange: kangaroos that hopped like giant rabbits, platypuses that defied classification. Could Decellia's monsters have been early, mangled accounts of real fauna? And what of those golden cities? While no metropolises existed in Aboriginal Australia, the region's intricate trade routes and ceremonial sites might have seemed like urban centers to outsiders expecting another Tenochtitlan. The Decellia's map doesn't just challenge our timeline of discovery, it forces us to confront how knowledge warps as it travels. Every dragon on its surface might be a distorted kangaroo, every cyclops a misunderstood warrior in body paint. This wasn't just a mapmaker's whim, it was a mirror reflecting Europe's desperate hunger to fill the blank spaces on its charts, even if it meant turning whispers into winged serpents. And in that hunger, we see something raw and human, the terror and wonder of a world still vast beyond comprehension. The Urbano Monte map isn't just a collection of pages, it's a portal to a 16th century mind trying to contain the entire world. Created in 1587 by Italian nobleman Urbano Monte, this 60-page manuscript is unlike anything from its era. Instead of a flat sheet, Monte envisioned Earth as a spinning globe, centuries before such projections became standard. His map unfolds like a kaleidoscope, with the North Pole at its center and continents radiating outward in a dizzying display of precision and fantasy. But what makes this work truly extraordinary isn't just its ambition. It's the unsettling accuracy of places Monte should never have seen. Monte's sources remain one of history's great enigmas. The map's margins overflow with annotations citing Portuguese explorers, Arab traders, and even secret charts from the Orient. His depiction of Japan, for instance, includes inland cities Europeans wouldn't document for decades, while his version of California, drawn as an island, matches indigenous oral traditions later dismissed by Spanish colonizers. Even more perplexing is his treatment of Antarctica. Though he never labeled it as such, a landmass near the southern pole bears a striking resemblance to the ice-free coasts seen in the Piri Reis and Orontius Finaeus maps. Was Monte tapping into the same lost geographic tradition? The map's spherical design raises even thornier questions. Monte didn't just sketch a globe, he calculated. His notes describe a complex system of overlapping circles to account for curvature, a technique that wouldn't be formalized until the 19th century. How did a Milanese aristocrat with no known nautical experience develop such advanced cartography? Some scholars point to his connections with Jesuit missionaries who were smuggling forbidden knowledge from China and the Americas. Others speculate about the shadowy Academy of Secrets, a Renaissance think tank rumored to have preserved ancient scientific texts. Monte's blending of myth and measurement only deepens the mystery. Alongside real-world coastlines, he populated his map with griffins guarding Siberian gold and pygmies battling cranes in Africa, creatures straight out of medieval bestiaries. Yet these fantasies coexist with shockingly modern details. The Amazon River splits into tributaries exactly as satellite imagery later confirmed, while the St. Lawrence River's estuary mirrors modern hydrographic charts. This juxtaposition suggests Monte wasn't just copying myths but interpreting them, perhaps decoding symbolic descriptions from indigenous informants or pre-Columbian sources. The most haunting possibility is that Monte's map is a mosaic of classified knowledge. His depiction of the Maldives includes submerged atolls not officially mapped until the 20th century, while his notes mention sea kings' reckonings that could plot ocean currents. These details hint at a clandestine exchange of geographic data, perhaps passed among Mediterranean merchant families or stolen from Ottoman or Ming archives. Monty himself seemed aware of the danger. He bound his manuscript tightly, as if to protect its secrets. What's heartbreaking is realizing how close we came to losing it all. The Urbano-Monty map nearly vanished into private collections before resurfacing in the 21st century, its pages brittle with age. Today, digitized versions reveal layers of revisions, showing Monty obsessively updating coastlines as new reports reached him. This wasn't just art or science, it was a lifelong obsession to compress the infinite complexity of the world onto paper. In the end, the map's greatest lesson might be about the fragility of knowledge itself. Monty's work stands as a bridge between eras, where the line between discovery and myth blurred, and where a single man's hunger to chart the unknown could preserve whispers of civilizations long gone. Whether visionary or conduit, Urbano-Monty left us more than a map. He left a riddle inked in the margins of history, waiting to be deciphered. These 20 maps aren't just artifacts, they're whispers from the edges of history, screaming that our timeline of discovery is missing entire chapters. Think about it, we've been taught that the world was pieced together slowly, each continent revealed by brave explorers in a neat, linear progression. But these maps shatter that illusion. They show coastlines that shouldn't have been charted, land masses that shouldn't have been known, and details that couldn't have been guessed. Antarctica without ice, the Amazon's twisting rivers, the Pacific Ocean's vastness, all appearing centuries before official records claim anyone saw them. So what does this mean? The simplest explanation is that history is messier than we've been told. Maybe the Vikings weren't the only ones crossing the Atlantic before Columbus. Maybe Polynesian navigators didn't just island hop, they mapped continents. Or perhaps there were civilizations lost to time, their knowledge carried forward on fragments of parchment, surviving wars, purges, and the slow decay of ages. Some of these maps, like Piri Reis's or Orontius Finaeus's, openly admit they're copying older sources, but how old and who created those originals? Then there's the unsettling possibility that ancient cultures had tools or techniques we've yet to rediscover. The precision in these maps, latitude lines matching modern calculations, mountain ranges hidden under ice, suggests more than just skilled guesswork. Could the Greeks or Phoenicians have possessed advanced surveying instruments? Did the Ming dynasty's treasure fleets carry cartographic secrets that never made it into the official records? Or could some of these maps be evidence of something even more extraordinary, a global network of knowledge stretching back further than we dare imagine? The ocean might hold answers. Sunken cities like Dwarka in India or Heracleon off Egypt's coast prove how much civilization can vanish beneath the waves. If entire ports can disappear, why not the maps they produced? And let's not forget the libraries. Alexandria burned, Baghdad's House of Wisdom sacked, the Maya codices destroyed. How many other Piri Reis maps were lost to fire or neglect? But here's the real twist. These maps don't just challenge the past, they force us to confront how history gets written. Winners control the narrative, empires erase inconvenient truths. The Zeno maps accurate Greenland, the Cagnito's pre-colonial Africa. These weren't flukes. They were fragments of a bigger story, one where knowledge flowed freely across cultures until someone decided it shouldn't. So where do we go from here? Every time a new map surfaces in an attic or a forgotten archive, it's another chance to rewrite what we know. Maybe the next breakthrough will come from artificial intelligence analyzing faded ink, or a diver finding a shipwreck's charred chest. Until then, these 20 maps remain open questions, daring us to reconsider not just where we've been, but how much we've forgotten. If these mysteries pull at your curiosity, you're not alone. Hit subscribe to join us as we keep unraveling history's tangled threads. And drop a comment below. Do you think these maps are accidental masterpieces or deliberate clues left by a past that's far more connected than we ever guessed? The conversation is just